Hello everybody, Calamity here, and this video is going to be all about Xiangling. If you're a new player and you're wondering why should you build Xiangling, I'm going to go over everything you need to know about this character, from her talents, weapon recommendations, artifacts, how to build those artifacts and what substats to look for, her constellations, her team comps. She is what I would call a staple character. She is a part of so many strong teams in the game, and she continues to remain one of the strongest 4-star characters in the game, carrying you from your early game adventures all the way to the end game in Spiral Abyss. We have quite a lot of info to cover, so let's get started with her talent. Her first talent is just her normal attack talent. It's called Dofu. There isn't really anything unique about it other than the combo itself, but Xiangling is primarily an off-field DPS, so we're not going to be using her normal attack. So let's move on to the skill. When using her elemental skill, she's going to summon her friend Guba that will continuously breathe fire at opponents and deal AoE pyro damage. While this skill description is short and I can appreciate that, it is however missing some much needed info. This is more of a utility skill and not something you should be using for damage. If we take a look at the flame damage multipliers, even at level 9, it's only 189%. Granted, it does attack multiple times, but the attacks are pretty slow and with limited range. Guba also doesn't move once he's summoned, so if you're fighting against an enemy that teleports a lot, moves a lot, or worst case scenario flies, your Guba is not going to be able to do much damage in that scenario. One more thing worth pointing out is that Guba also does not generate a lot of elemental particles. I believe he generates only one particle every time he hits an enemy with his fire breathing. This is probably Xiangling's biggest weakness and why she needs a ton of energy recharge, as well as why in a lot of her team comps she does have a sort of pyro battery, which ends up being Bennett in most cases. Next up, we got the cream of the crop, and that's Pyronado. This is her elemental burst, and this is what makes Xiangling insanely powerful. If you read the skill description, it's not going to say why it's so strong. Pyronado is a burst that does a ton of AoE damage and can continue to do that damage even when Xiangling's not on the field. So as soon as you pop her burst and she does the animation, you can swap to another character. What they don't tell you in the skill description is that Pyronado does not have an ICD, which stands for internal cooldown. This is sort of an advanced concept that I'm not going to get into for newer players, but because her burst doesn't have an ICD, it basically lets you apply pyro to your enemies every time it hits them. And this is actually really huge because no other character, or I should say it's rare to find a skill or a burst that doesn't have an ICD. But because it doesn't, this means you can consistently vaporize or melt along with the Pyronado, and it does do pretty good damage on its own. And in my opinion, it is definitely one of the strongest bursts in the entire game. Let's talk about her passive talents. We have Crossfire and Beware. It's super hot. These are pretty simple. Crossfire is going to increase Guba's range by 20%, which isn't much. And again, flying enemies, not going to matter, or enemies that teleport, not going to matter. That tiny increase in range isn't that significant. And then when Beware It's Hot is what makes the elemental skill sort of a utility thing here. Because once the elemental skill expires, it will drop a chili, and it's sort of like a power-up. You walk over it, you pick it up, you get a 10% increase in your attack. Also, I just noticed Xiangling's like skirt thing in front of her is like freaking out. What is going on? Anyways, the last talent has to do with cooking, because Xiangling's a chef, so you have a chance to receive double the product when you're making attack boosting dishes. Let's move on to weapon recommendations for Xiangling. Now, a common nickname that's given to her, Xiangling is often called the Archon of pole arms. And this is because Xiangling can work with just about any polearm in the game, and it's going to be a good option for her. The only thing is you might just have to adjust what you look for on your artifact. But a weapon that I highly recommend, and it's free to play friendly, is the Catch. This is a 4-star weapon that you can obtain from fishing, although you are going to need to fish quite a lot to get all the needed fish necessary to get this weapon up to Refinement 5. You can speed up this process by going to other players' worlds and fishing in their world, but always be sure to ask before you just start fishing. Part of the reason why I recommend the catch is because it has a substat of energy recharge. As I mentioned before, Xiangling is a character that has poor particle regeneration, and you want that burst up as often as possible. So you need to build that energy recharge on your Xiangling. It's a very important substat for her. The weapon's effect also gives us exactly what we needed. It gives you elemental burst damage and elemental burst crit rate. Once again, this is perfect because the burst is the only thing we care about. I'm just gonna say this, but when it comes to 5-star pole arms, honestly, any of them are good. From the Staff of Homa, Primordial Jade Cutter, Skyward Spine, Staff of the Scarlet Sands, whatever 5-star pole arm you got, if you have, you know, maybe an extra one or something because you were pulling on weapon banners, give it to your Xiangling and it'll work just fine. If you are looking for other 4-star options, a Dragon's Bane is also good. Elemental Mastery is the subset here, which is fine because Xiangling is primarily used in elemental reaction comps like Vaporize or Melt, and Elemental Mastery helps amplify that damage. Wavebreaker's Fin, also a good option here. Even though the subset is attack percentage, the weapon's effect here, is really good because if you have a team with very expensive burst costs, well then you're gonna get a huge increase to your burst damage. You can also give your Xiangling support utility weapons like a Favonius Lance. Like I said before, energy is not Xiangling's strong suit here, so giving her a Favonius Lance gives her the ability to generate some energy particles here, and as well as give her energy recharge on the substat. And because Xiangling is a sub DPS, you do want to get crit rate on her anyways, so chances are you are going to proc this weapon's effect naturally. Other weapons you could go for are the Kitane Cross Spear. If you have Inazuma unlocked, you can craft this weapon up to Refinement 5. Most of the pole arms in this game are good for Xiangling. Hopefully you can see why she's called the Archon of pole arms. Okay, let's talk artifacts. My recommendation for artifact, it's going to be an Emblem of Severed Fate. The reason I recommend this artifact set is because once again it gives you that much needed energy recharge substat on the 2-piece effect, and the 4-piece effect is going to turn that energy recharge into additional burst damage, which again, that's what matters the most with Xiangling. If for whatever reason you do not want an Emblem of Severed Fate on your Xiangling, you want something else, you can opt in to go for a Crimson Witch set, although that domain sucks to farm, so I recommend doing a Mystic Offering instead. And when it comes to substats for your Xiangling, she has a bit of versatility when it comes to building her artifacts. So since she is a sub DPS, getting crit rate, getting crit damage, getting attack percentage, getting elemental mastery, all of those stats really good. Also, energy recharge is going to be that other stat that you definitely want to build on. Now, how much energy recharge should you build up or do you need is going to depend on how you're building your Xiangling. If you gave her something like a Favonius Lance, well then that energy recharge needs is going to go down a bit. Same with my Xiangling in particular because I gave her the cat. That one gives her quite a bit of energy recharge. Then you get the 2-piece effect from Emblem of Severed Fate, so I didn't have to go too hard on my Xiangling's energy recharge. But if you are looking for a number that I recommend, I definitely recommend going for 180% to 200% energy recharge. Of course, if you can get more, go for it, you know, without compromising your damage too much. Which is also why Emblem of Severed Fate is, again, a really good set for her because you do get that damage increase based off your energy recharge. When it comes to the sands, you have 3 options here, and again, this is going to depend on what weapon and what artifact set you chose to give your Xiangling. Mine has attack percentage. You can go for that if you want to. But if you find your energy recharge lacking, definitely get an energy recharge main stat sands or elemental mastery for bigger elemental reaction damage. When it comes to the goblet, we're gonna definitely want to get a pyro damage bonus goblet. If you are starting out and you're just unlucky and unable to get a good pyro damage bonus goblet, you can just go for attack percentage or elemental mastery. Circlet, I sound like a broken record at this point, but once again, depends on what weapon you're giving your Xiangling. My Xiangling gets free crit rate from the catch, so I gave her a crit damage main stat circlet. So either crit rate, crit damage on the main stat of your circlet, whichever one you're lacking more of, definitely get it on the circlet. This one sucks, by the way. This circlet absolutely sucks. Definitely do better than what I got here. Next up, we have Constellations for Xiangling. Hopefully you're able to get her to C6. She is definitely worth it, and I feel like most players will as you continue to pull. on those banners, you'll just get her to C6 naturally over time. I'm gonna quickly go over these constellations. Some of them aren't really that great, but let's just get started. So her C1 is gonna add even more utility to Gooba's to the elemental skill. This is going to make Gooba's attacks reduce pyro res by 15% for 6 seconds. This is actually really nice. So now you have Gooba reducing pyro res and giving you an attack boost at the end of its duration. C2 is probably going to be her most useless constellation, unless you're planning to eventually build her for normal attacks in the future. But this adds a explosion at the end of her normal attack combo, which does 75% of her attack. Not something we use, again, because we're just doing the burst and skill. C3 and C5 are going to increase burst and skill respectively, with C3 being a big increase in damage and very welcome. C4 is going to increase Pyro NATO duration by 40%, which is fantastic. C6 is going to give all of your party members a 15% pyro damage bonus. This includes Xiangling herself, of course, so you basically just a free 15% for that pyro NATO. Next up, we have team comps. Please ignore the bottom left name, okay? I have run out of team slots to use, and there are a ton you can use for Xiangling. An example of a Xiangling team that does vaporize reactions as its main source of damage. We have Bennett here, as I mentioned before, being the battery for Xiangling, as well as being the healer of the team, and of course he has that damage buff. Kazuha is here to group up enemies as well as to apply swirl for that increase of damage from the Viridescent Veneer set, and of course Tartaglia is our choice of main DPS. See, the thing is here, chat, is that Tartaglia and Kazuha are changeable. If you don't have Kazuha, you could use Sucrose instead, and that would be viable. Tartaglia is changeable here because Xiangling will work with any Hydra DPS. If you want to use Ayato here, you can use him as well. You can use Yolan if you're deciding to use her as a main DPS, and you can vaporize her damage. Like, you can change your main DPS and your buffer, but you cannot change Xiangling. She does not have a replacement. There is no, well, if you don't have Xiangling, then use this character, because you're just gonna lose on so much damage because of her ability to constantly apply pyro. If you're looking for more team comps, well, we have the original international team that I had in my Chongyun guide before, and my Bennett guide. It looks like this. This is a team that primarily does its damage through its bursts, and they're all just able to feed energy to each other to do this consistently until whatever you're fighting is just dead. The more popular version of this team, and the name of the team, is the Raiden International team. This is gonna make sure your Xiangling never has to worry about energy recharge ever again, and she will definitely be able to burst off cooldown with the help of both Bennett, and you have Raiden Shogun providing energy to her team. Another team you could use Xiangling on, and I guess this is more topical because she's in the banner right now, is Ganyu. You can do a Ganyu Melt team, and once again we have Bennett here again to provide energy and healing and the attack buff for the team, and then we have Xiangling for shields so that Ganyu can focus on just shooting her enemies. Alright, for our combat demonstration, I wanted to use basically an iteration of the international team with Rosaria. And we are going to just start off with Bennett's Burst, use Xin Cho, and then we're going to use Xiangling. And you can basically see every instance that the Pyro NATO goes around. You're seeing it say Vaporize, you're seeing it say Melt. And that is once again because Xiangling's burst has no ICD, so we can constantly do it every time. Something else that I forgot to note about Xiangling's burst is that it does snapshot. So if we do Bennett's burst, and then we do Xiangling's burst, while on it, even if I step off, it's still gonna do the increased damage as if I were stepping on Bennett's burst. So it does snapshot. For those that don't know what snapshotting is, that basically means it's gonna be affected by any sort of buff to it for the entire duration of Pyro NATO. And we're just basically gonna clean up the rest of these wolves. And it should be pretty easy. Let's try to get Bennett's burst again before we do Xiangling's burst, just so we can get more damage on it. Do it again. You can use Xiangling's normal attacks here just to activate Jingcho's swords, because she is pretty fast at attacking. So yeah, we're not using the normal attack just for damage, we're using it just for Jingcho's burst. Don't forget to summon Gooba. There we go. And we have our last bit of enemies here. Maybe we can do one more Pyronado? I don't think so. The freeze. If we had Pyronado, we could melt it and do big damage, but that's gonna be a wrap. Now, something that I hope you were paying attention to during the combat demonstration was just to see that there were, as long as Pyronado was up, there was a constant stream of melt, vaporize, elemental reactions going on. That is what makes Xiangling so strong, and that's what it means to not have an ICD on your burst. Alright, that's gonna have to do it for this Xiangling guide. I hope it was helpful to somebody. If you do have any questions about Xiangling, if you feel like I missed something, please let me know in the comments down below. And with that being said, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like if you want to see more of this sort of content in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Good luck on building your Xiangling.